English to Success. Your path to success.
Chapter 1. The Prisoner. Tom sat in his small, dark cell. The walls of the prison were cold and hard, made of thick stone. There was a small window near the ceiling, but it was so high that Tom could not reach it. Through the window, he could see only a tiny part of the sky. Sometimes he could see the birds flying far away, and that made him feel even more sad. He longed for the open sky and the feeling of fresh air on his face. The room smelled old and dusty. It was hard to breathe sometimes. There were no flowers or trees outside, just big, thick walls. Tom missed the sun. He remembered the warm sun from when he was free, before he was put in the prison. He thought about the days when he could run outside and play, when he could feel happy and free. The prison was not a place for happiness. There were no friends to talk to. The food was bad, and the bed was small. Every morning, a loud bell rang, waking Tom up early. It was cold when he woke up, and he did not want to get out of bed, but he had to. Prison life was hard. Every day felt the same. He would get up, eat some small bread, and go to the small yard where the prisoners would walk in circles. The guards would watch them carefully, making sure no one tried to escape. The yard was full of gravel, and there were no trees or grass, just dust. Tom hated it. One day, while he was walking in the yard, Tom saw someone watching him. It was another prisoner, a man in a cell next to his. The man had brown eyes, and his hair was short and messy. He looked at Tom with a smile. Tom felt a little nervous at first, but the man seemed kind. He walked over to him. "Hi," the man said quietly. "I'm Jack. I've been here for a long time." Tom looked at Jack. He had not seen him before. "Hi," Tom said back. "I'm Tom. How long have you been here?" Jack sighed and looked down at the ground. "Too long, but I don't want to talk about that now. What I want to know is, how long have you been here, Tom?" Tom thought about it for a moment. "Not too long, but it feels like forever. I hate it here. I want to be free." Jack nodded. "I know what you mean. I've been in this prison for many years, and I still dream of being free. Do you know what I've learned? There's always a way out. You just have to find it." Tom's heart raced. "What do you mean? How can I get out of here?" Jack smiled, and his eyes sparkled with hope. "I've been watching the guards, the walls, the doors. This place has its secrets. There is always a way to escape, Tom, and I think we can find it together." Tom felt a little nervous, but also excited. "You really think we can escape?" "Yes," Jack said. "I know we can." As the days passed, Tom and Jack began to talk more. They shared their hopes and dreams for the future. Jack told Tom about his life before prison. Jack had been a farmer, and he loved to work in the fields. He missed the fresh air and the sound of animals. But now, he was stuck in the prison, just like Tom. Jack wanted to be free so he could go back to his old life. Tom listened carefully. He was amazed by Jack's knowledge. Jack had been in prison for a long time, so he knew a lot about the guards and the prison itself. He knew which parts of the prison were weak and which places were safe. Jack started to teach Tom everything he knew. They would talk in whispers at night when the guards were asleep. "I have a plan," Jack said one night, his voice low and serious. "We can escape, but we need to be very careful. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Tom's heart skipped a beat. What do we have to do? Jack smiled again. First, we need to get tools. We can't escape with just our hands. We need something strong to dig through the floor. Tom nodded. Where will we get the tools? Jack looked around the cell. We have to be smart. We can use what we have. The guards won't pay attention to us if we are careful. Tom and Jack began to make their plans. They would dig through the floor of their cells, using small spoons that they had hidden. They would work at night when the guards were not looking. They would dig slowly and quietly so no one would notice. Each night, Tom would wait until the guards passed by. Then he would quietly get out of his bed and begin digging. It was hard work. The stone floor was tough, and it took a long time to make any progress. But Tom didn't care. He wanted to be free. He would dig every night, his hands sore, his back aching, but he kept going. Jack helped too. They worked together, each night making small holes in the stone floor. They were careful to cover up their work so no one would notice. Tom and Jack knew they couldn't make a mistake. If the guards found out, they would be in big trouble. They needed to be patient and wait for the right moment. As the days went by, Tom began to feel a little more hopeful. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a chance to escape. He thought about his family and how he wanted to see them again. He imagined what it would be like to walk outside in the fresh air, to feel the sun on his face, and to be free. But it was not easy. The work was hard, and sometimes Tom felt like giving up. His hands were sore, and he was always tired. But every time he felt like quitting, he would think about Jack. Jack was strong, and he never gave up. Tom knew he couldn't give up either. Together, they could do it. Chapter 2: The First Plan. That night, after the bell rang, Tom and Jack sat quietly in their cells. The lights were dim, and the sounds of the prison were muffled. The air felt heavy, and the stone walls around them seemed to close in. Tom couldn't stop thinking about what Jack had said earlier. Could they really escape? It seemed impossible, but Jack sounded so sure. Tom's heart was beating faster as he thought about the plan. He couldn't wait to begin. Maybe, just maybe, he could be free again. Through the bars of his cell, Tom looked over at Jack's cell. Jack was sitting on his small bed, staring at the floor. When he saw that Tom was looking, he smiled. "Are you ready?" Jack asked quietly. Tom nodded. "Yes, but how are we going to do it? How can we escape from here?" Jack leaned forward and whispered, "We need to dig a hole. If we can dig through the floor, we can escape. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know we can do it." Tom felt a rush of excitement. He had never thought about digging a hole before, but it made sense. If they could dig a hole under the floor, they could crawl out of their cells. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. "But the floor is hard," Tom said, worried. "How are we going to dig through it?" Jack smiled again. "We can use our spoons. The guards won't think we're digging. We just need to be careful." Tom thought for a moment. Using spoons to dig sounded hard, but Jack was right. They had to try. He had nothing to lose. "Okay," Tom said quietly. "Let's do it." For the next few days, Tom and Jack worked in secret. They had to be careful because the guards were always watching. They couldn't dig when the guards were close, so they waited until night time. At night, when the prison was quiet, Tom and Jack would get out of bed and begin their work. They would dig slowly, making small holes in the floor. They used the spoons they had kept hidden for this purpose. The spoons were small and not very strong, but they worked together, carefully scraping away the stone. It was hard work, and their hands got sore, but they didn't stop. Every night they would dig a little more. Sometimes Tom felt tired, but Jack would encourage him to keep going. Jack told him that they had to be patient, that they had to take their time. If they rushed, they might make a mistake, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. On the fourth night, Tom looked down at the hole they had made. It wasn't very big, but it was starting to get deeper. They had made good progress. The hole was just big enough to fit their spoons into, but not big enough for them to crawl through yet. It was going to take time. "How much longer do you think it will take?" Tom asked, wiping his brow. Jack looked at the hole and then at Tom. "I think we're almost there. Maybe just a few more nights." Tom nodded, feeling hopeful. He could see the light at the end of the tunnel. He could almost taste freedom. But even though he felt excited, there was also fear in his heart. What if the guards found out what they were doing? What if the plan didn't work? "Do you think the guards will hear us?" Tom asked quietly. Jack shook his head. "No, if we're careful, they won't. We just have to keep digging quietly." That night, they worked harder than ever. Tom's hands were sore, and his back hurt from bending over the hole, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had to get out of this place. He had to be free. As they worked, they didn't say much. The only sound was the soft scraping of their spoons against the stone. The night felt long, and the work seemed endless, but they kept going. They had to keep going. By the end of the week, the hole was bigger. Tom and Jack could both fit their hands into it now. The hole was still not big enough for them to crawl through, but it was getting close. One night, as they took a short break, Tom looked at Jack. "Do you really think we can do it?" he asked. Jack looked at him, his eyes serious. "Yes, we've come this far. There's no turning back now." Tom felt a rush of excitement again. He believed Jack. They were so close to escaping. Chapter 3. The Discovery. Tom and Jack had been working together for several days now. The hole they were digging was slowly growing bigger, but it wasn't enough yet. They knew they had to keep going. Each night, they would get out of bed quietly and start digging, being very careful not to make too much noise. The guards always walked by their cells, but they never noticed the small hole they were making. It was the middle of the week when something strange happened. Tom was sitting on his bed, looking at the small hole in the floor. Jack had just finished scraping away some of the stone when he suddenly stopped. Tom looked up at him, noticing the worried look on his face. "What's wrong?" Tom asked. Jack didn't answer right away. He was staring at the hole in the floor, his eyes wide. Slowly, he reached down and pulled something out of the hole. Tom's heart skipped a beat. What was that? Jack held up a small, shiny object. It was a key. The key looked old and rusty, but it was a key. Tom felt a rush of excitement. Where did this come from? Tom whispered. Jack shook his head. I don't know, but I think it's important. We need to be careful. This might be the key to something bigger. Tom's mind raced. Could this key be the key to their escape? Could it open the door to freedom? They had been so focused on digging, they hadn't thought about the possibility of finding something like this. Jack was already looking around the cell, checking the walls and the bars. Tom did the same, his heart pounding. Was there a door they could open with the key? He had never noticed anything before, but now he was looking at everything closely. After a few minutes of searching, Jack stood up and smiled. I think I know where it might go, he said. There is a small lock on the outside of our cell. I've seen it before, but I didn't know what it was for. Tom's heart raced. A lock? A real lock? He had never noticed it before, but now he couldn't stop thinking about it. Could this be the chance they had been waiting for? Jack held the key in his hand, carefully turning it over. We need to try this key tomorrow, when the guards are busy. If it fits, we can open the door and escape. We just have to be quiet. Tom nodded. He didn't say anything, but inside, he was feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could escape. The next day, Tom spent the whole afternoon thinking about the key. He couldn't concentrate on anything else. Every time the guards walked by, he would look at the door, wondering if the key would fit. Jack seemed calm, but Tom could see the excitement in his eyes. They both knew that if the key worked, their plan might be in danger. They had to be careful. That night, after the bell rang, they began their work again. The guards walked around the prison, their heavy boots echoing on the stone floor. Tom waited until the guards were far away before he quietly got up. Jack was already sitting on his bed, holding the key. He was ready. Tom's heart was beating fast as Jack carefully approached the small lock on the outside of the cell. The lock was small and rusty, just like the key. Jack reached out and slowly put the key into the lock. He turned it, and for a moment, nothing happened. Tom held his breath. Then, with a soft click, the lock opened. Tom gasped. It worked! The key fit. Jack smiled and whispered, It's time. They both looked at each other, their eyes filled with excitement. They had to move quickly now. Tom's heart was pounding as he carefully pushed the door open. It was quiet, so quiet that it almost felt unreal. The door opened slowly, and Tom felt the cool air from the outside. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe again. Chapter 4. The Great Escape. Tom and Jack's hearts were racing. They had opened the door. Now they had to escape the prison. The cold air from the hallway rushed into their cell, and they both looked at the empty corridor outside. It was dark, and there were no guards in sight. They had to be careful, very careful. Jack was the first to step outside the cell. Tom followed him, trying to be as quiet as possible. His heart was beating so loudly, he felt like the guards would hear it, but he stayed calm and focused on the mission. They crept down the hallway, staying close to the walls. The prison was still and quiet, but they knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The guards were always walking around, and if they saw them, the escape would be over. Jack stopped and looked at Tom. We need to get to the outside wall. That's where the real challenge begins. Tom nodded. They had been planning this escape for days, but now that they were out of the cell, it felt real. The door they had opened led them to a dark hallway. It felt like they had stepped into another world. Tom had always seen the prison from inside his cell, but now he was on the outside, looking around. They moved quietly, using the shadows to hide from the guards. Every time they heard footsteps, they would stop and wait until the sound faded. It was a tense, slow journey, but they made it to the end of the hallway. "Now we need to find a way to get over the wall," Jack whispered. Tom looked up. The wall was high and covered with barbed wire at the top. There was no easy way to climb it. "We can't climb it," Tom said, "but maybe we can find something to help us." They walked around the prison yard, looking for anything they could use. Then Jack stopped and pointed to a pile of old broken wood and metal pieces. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. They started pulling pieces of wood and metal from the pile. It took a long time, but eventually they had enough to build something that might help them climb over the wall. They worked quickly, knowing that they couldn't stay out for too long. After about an hour, they had built a small ladder. It wasn't very tall, but it was enough to get them over the wall. Jack climbed up first, testing the ladder carefully. When he reached the top, he looked down at Tom. "It's safe. You can come up now," Jack said. Tom climbed the ladder slowly, his heart still racing. When he reached the top, he looked out over the prison walls. The view was amazing. Beyond the wall, there was a large field, and in the distance, Tom could see trees. It was the first time in a long time that he had seen anything that wasn't made of stone. "We're almost there," Jack said, smiling. "We just need to climb down." They both carefully climbed over the barbed wire at the top of the wall, and then they slid down the other side. They were free. Chapter 5: The Outside World. Tom and Jack stood outside the prison walls, looking at the open field in front of them. The air was fresh, and the wind felt cool against their skin. Tom took a deep breath, feeling the freedom he had dreamed of for so long. "We did it," Tom said, smiling. Jack smiled back. "Yes, we did. But now we need to be careful. The guards will be looking for us." They walked quickly, staying low to the ground. They knew they couldn't stop yet. The guards would soon realize they were missing, and they would send people to search for them. As they walked through the field, Tom looked around. It was so different from the dark, cold prison. The sun was starting to rise, casting a golden light over the trees in the distance. "What will we do now?" Tom asked. "We need to find a safe place," Jack said. "We can't stay out in the open. The more we walk, the better our chances of escaping." They walked for hours, staying away from roads and towns. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they had to keep moving. The farther they got from the prison, the safer they would be. As the sun began to set, they found a small, quiet village. It was peaceful, with houses and small shops lining the streets. Tom and Jack stayed in the shadows, trying to avoid being seen. They knew that if someone recognized them, their escape would be over. "We need to rest," Jack said, after a long day of walking. "Let's find a place to sleep." They found a small barn at the edge of the village. It wasn't much, but it was hidden and safe. They crept inside and lay down on the straw, exhausted but happy. Tom closed his eyes, feeling the soft straw beneath him. He thought about everything that had happened. It had been a hard journey, but he had made it. He was free, and with Jack by his side, he knew that he could make it even farther. Chapter 6: A New Life. The next day, Tom and Jack woke up early and started walking again. They didn't want to stay in one place for too long. They knew they had to keep moving. "We're free, but we need to be smart," Jack said. "We can't get too comfortable." They traveled for days, moving from town to town. They never stayed in one place for too long, always staying in the shadows, always moving forward. Tom had never seen so many new places before. There were forests, rivers, and mountains. It was beautiful, and he felt alive in a way he hadn't in a long time. Every step he took made him feel closer to his new life. One afternoon, they arrived at a small village. It was quiet, with only a few people walking around. Tom and Jack decided to stay here for a while. They found a place to sleep in a small cabin, hidden behind some trees. Over the next few weeks, Tom and Jack began to build a new life. They found work in the village, doing small jobs for the people who lived there. Tom worked as a helper in a small shop, while Jack helped with farming. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by. Chapter 7: The Past Returns. Months passed, and Tom and Jack grew used to their new life. They had made new friends in the village, and they were beginning to feel at home. But one day, everything changed. Tom was walking through the village when he saw a group of soldiers. They were wearing uniforms and walking in a line, looking around. Tom's heart dropped. "They're looking for us," he whispered to Jack. Jack looked worried. "We have to leave, now!" They ran into the woods, hiding behind trees and bushes. Tom's heart was racing as he heard the soldiers getting closer. They couldn't let them find them. They ran for hours, not stopping until they were far away from the village. Tom was tired, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. "We need to keep going," Jack said. "We can't go back now." Chapter 8: The Chase. Tom and Jack kept running, moving deeper into the forest. They had to lose the soldiers. They couldn't let them catch up. As they ran, Tom felt like he was in a race. His legs were tired, but he kept going. The sound of the soldiers' boots was getting closer. "We have to hide," Jack said, pulling Tom behind a large tree. "Quietly. If they pass by, we'll be safe." They held their breath as the soldiers walked past. Tom's heart was pounding in his chest. He had never been so scared. But they were safe. For now. Chapter 9: A New Plan. They waited in the forest for a few days, resting and planning their next move. They couldn't stay in the forest forever. They needed a new plan. Tom and Jack decided to travel at night, when it was harder for the soldiers to find them. They would use the cover of darkness to move from town to town, always staying one step ahead of the soldiers. Chapter 10: Freedom. After weeks of running and hiding, Tom and Jack finally found a new place to settle. It was a small, peaceful village far from the prison and the soldiers. Here they could live without fear. Tom and Jack had made it. They had escaped, and now they had a chance at a new life. It wasn't easy, but they had each other, and that was all they needed.